What is up with Wanda? What's going on with Wanda in her psychology, in her emotional state? We're going to get into it in this week's video, and it's going to be heavy on the spoilers. I know the series went live in like January. It's now October, so we've had plenty of chance to watch it. I just watched it last week, but there's going to be spoilers throughout. So if you haven't met me before, I'm Cheryl, relationship expert. This is part of the Relationship Expert React series. We've done Wonder Woman so far and Loki, so definitely dig into that. If this is interesting and exciting and juicy for you, not only am I going to be picking out some patterns and themes today in the WandaVision series on Disney Plus, but I'm also going to be applying it to our own lives. So it might feel a little bit challenging at times, a little bit confronting, but it's really important we do this work because, you know, there are people, most of them are on Twitter, I find, personally and professionally, in my experience, I find them on Twitter. And, you know, these people are very, very good at giving you a good argument, giving you all the psychological lingo, but they don't have the self-awareness, which looks like, yes, understanding all the psychology behind things, but then also being able to look at it and go, oh, actually, I do that. I do that. So this is not like one of those intellectual, like mental masturbation exercises. It's also an opportunity for us to look at ourselves and go, how does this apply to my own life? Why is this series making me cry? What does it tell me about myself? How can I use this love of this series of these characters and this depth of understanding and compassion and empathy for them? How can I use that to understand myself at a deeper level? So I'm going to be giving you prompts throughout. I've got 4 little points I want to go through. If you've watched the series before, I tend to have 4 little themes and patterns that I've pulled out of the series, and during each point I'm going to give you something that you can apply to your own life if you so choose. If you just want to, it's written on the back of an envelope. That's the situation. If I put it here on my laptop, I don't think you can see it right now. Okay, so let's get into it. Like I said, heavy on the spoilers. Really can't do this video without getting into the specifics. So here we go. Wanda creates Westview. She creates this fancy world that means to avoid difficult emotions, right? Now, we all know what that is. We all know she creates the town, the television series, as a result of the grief she feels over Vision. And as a result of that, she gets a lot of people involved in this. And towards the end, we see her developing a lot of empathy and taking a lot of responsibility for what she's actually done. And I cried so much at the end of this series. I don't know if you did as well. I found it really moving, really beautiful, a really beautiful exploration into what it is to be in grief and how we often need an escape hatch for difficult emotions when we don't want to face it, and how we so often do that. Let's look at those specifically without getting into this series too much, because if you've watched this, I'm guessing you've seen it and you've watched it, so I don't need to tell you verbatim what happens. But let's look at when this pattern starts. So she enjoys watching these shows like Dick Van Dyke with her parents back where she's from in Eastern Europe. I forget exactly where it is, so I apologize for being so ignorant. She's watching this with her parents, and it's the last thing she sees before her parents are killed. It's also something she sees when she's then trapped in, or perceives herself to be trapped under the rubble with her brother for 2 days. A television is still playing and she watches it, so it comforts her during that time. It also happens when her brother dies and she's sitting on the bed and Vision comes and sits next to her and she's watching the show, right? So it becomes her coping mechanism, it becomes her pattern, it becomes this deeply ingrained neural pathway of when things are difficult, she's going to escape into this very specific fictional world. I particularly love that point in this series when Darcy Lewis, fucking love Darcy Lewis more than life itself. I think she is amazing. I'm just going to take this off because it's very squeaky, and also I put the heating on and it's starting to kick in, so we'll put the leather jacket. Oh, shit. Oh, well. The vegan leather jacket, will put that just on the floor behind me, and there it will stay until the video ends. What I love about what Darcy says is everyone's kind of asking her, well, like, what is this? What is it you're seeing? And she's like, it's a 1950s sitcom. And that's what she keeps saying over and over again. And that's what Wanda creates, because that is the specific thing that she used to cope with the grief of losing her parents and losing her brother. So it's not surprising to me, as a relationship expert and someone that understands patterns in psychology and how we cope with emotions, it's not surprising to me at all. In fact, it's inevitable that when she's processing grief again, this time it's the grief of losing vision, she does the same thing that she did to cope with the loss of her parents and the loss of her brother. So this is what she does when she's in grief. She escapes into this very specific fictional world. Now, you might think that's very interesting, and you might think, I also know this, Cheryl. So what does this mean about your life? So I'd like you to think about some of the patterns that you have, some of the coping mechanisms you might be using or utilizing to escape from difficult emotions. The irony in this, and this is a little bit meta, is we might be escaping into these very series, right? Like Wanda and Loki and all the Disney Plus stuff, which is so compelling. And sometimes these series can be so compelling that we can really lose ourselves in them. But it's one thing, you know, to enjoy the art. It's another thing to want to then stay in the series and stay in it and stay in the emotion of that because of how it feels, and to then ignore our responsibilities or to not process difficult emotions because we'd rather stay in a fictional world. So just how Wanda created that fictional world, we might be doing the same thing. And look at, like with Wanda, how it starts at a very traumatic time and then she goes back to it again and again, almost like an elastic band. It kind of returns to where it started. Do you do that? Would be my question. And what does that look like? So I'll give you a specific example. Let's say when you're a kid, you're sent to your room and you're alone. So you're playing with your dolls, or you're imagining like having an imaginary friend with you, and you're in a very fictional universe that you create because you're a child, and that's often how children understand what's going on for them. They do it through play. Let's say you go through something else that's traumatic when you're in your teenage years. Maybe it's bullying or something like that. And so you write to not just to understand what you're feeling, but also to escape. And so you escape into thinking about people you have a crush on, or people that might be interesting to you when you put yourself in a fictional world. And then when you're an adult, when things get stressful, you do the same thing. It might take on a different form. It might not be movies and TV. It might be reading or writing novels, fan fiction, etc. And you're finding a way to escape. It's the escape hatch because the emotion is too difficult to face. So my challenge to you would be, how can you face that emotion? What is the emotion? First, ask yourself, what is the emotion? Which could sound like something along the lines of, I'm feeling sadness right now. I'm feeling afraid. I'm experiencing a lot of worry and doubt. Something feels really big and scary for me, and I'm not sure what it is, but I know there's something going on for me emotionally. Try and name it if you can, and say that either out loud or write it down so that it's there, and that helps you to process and move through it, right? And then ask yourself, how does this emotion want to be expressed or acknowledged? How does this emotion want to be expressed or acknowledged? What that means in non-psychological speak is just like, what do you want to do? Right? Do you want to write something? Do you want, not as an escapism thing, but do you want to write something to express that emotion? Do you want to paint? Do you want to draw? Do you want to create some kind of art? Do you want to dance? Do you want to punch a pillow? Do you want to drive into the middle of nowhere and scream? Like, how does that emotion want to be expressed? Do you want to write a letter to someone and read it out loud and then burn it? Right? How does the emotion want to creatively be acknowledged and expressed? You can do that through many different art forms. That is going to help you move through it instead of numbing, right? So I lingered quite a bit on point number 1, the escaping into fantasy worlds to cope with difficult or big emotions, because I think it's really important and I think it's really relevant to our times and to the world we're living in. There's another video I'll link it up above. Sorry, my brain's moving too fast for my mouth right now. I did another video on how Frontiers in Psychology found that people were reading more fan fiction during lockdown because they were trying to escape, and I think that's really valid too. So that video is linked up above. Let's get on to point number 2. Point number 2 is gaslighting / reality denial. We see this in Westview particularly. Is it called Westview? The place she's in is Westview, right? It's not Westfield, Westview. I think that's right. We see the people there doing that very like 1950s sitcom thing of like having the Colgate smile and perfect hair and perfect outfits, and everything's like apple pie and white picket fence. Oh, everything's fantastic. There's this kind of denying of reality, and this kind of there's also a bit of like, I would call it gaslighting, in the people are denying what's going on. And Wanda does it a little bit too, particularly to Vision. Now, I don't think there's any malice in it, but he's like, Wanda, what's going on? She's like, nothing. Everything's great. And it's clearly not great. It's clearly all going to hell in a handbasket. But he's like, something's up. What is it? And she's like, no, everything's fantastic. Or when she's having the baby, and her neighbour, and I have a list of the characters here because I knew I'd forget everyone. Monica Rambeau, love Monica Rambeau, what a great character. She's helping Wanda deliver the baby, and then she says, who are you? And the thing happens, and then Vision comes in, he goes, Wanda, where did Monica go? And she like goes blank and goes, she had to leave. You know, and she's like blasted this character through the reality she's created back into the field outside. So there is a bit of denying of reality there. So my question to you would be, did something like that happen in your family home when you were growing up? I don't mean did a Scarlet Witch create a fictional reality using a force field that looked like a 1950s sitcom and bring her partner back to life. That's oddly specific, right? But what I mean is, did people say things were fine when things weren't fine? Was there a big argument, and then the next day they're like, oh, I made this beautiful lunch for you, and look, isn't the sun shining, and don't you look beautiful today? And you're like, what fresh hell is this? You were arguing last night and no one's acknowledging it, right? So what happened in your family home where your reality was denied? And do you also have trouble in trusting yourself today, particularly trusting your version of events and your recollection of events, and or what you're feeling emotionally and what you see going on around you? Because when you've had your reality denied, even if it doesn't come from a malicious place, it means that you're going to have trouble trusting yourself. So there's just something to look at there, right? The third point is narcissism, kind of linked to the gaslighting. In that, there is a bit of narcissism in all of this. In narcissistic family systems, which can also be, there's an alcohol or drug problem with one parent, there's a parent that's mentally or emotionally really not well, not together, or physically they have an illness, that parent, that person with the narcissism or the illness or whatever it is, they become the sun that everyone else orbits around, right? That person is like the center of the universe, and everyone else in the family orbits around them. We very much see Wanda's show in every different decade that she uses, which I thought was brilliantly done, by the way, that it moves through time to the present day. So well done from an artistic perspective. But what we see is the whole thing is a massive metaphor for the narcissistic family system. There's everyone's revolving around this one person, to the point that it's all about her. I mean, it's her show, you know, and that's very intentional in the way they've scripted it, but it seems to me to be a massive metaphor for that kind of functioning of a family system. I'm not saying anything bad about her parenting or anything like that, because I actually think she's a really good person and has a really pure heart, but the way it was presented was very typical of when that happens in the family home. So your homework there is going to be to look at that and to say, well, what did that happen in my family? Was there someone with whom everything revolved around? It could be anything as benign as, I had an auntie who was very exuberant and everyone used to like listen to her stories and she was the one everyone focused on and I kind of felt invisible, all the way to someone had a full-blown cluster B personality disorder situation, or there was alcoholism or substance abuse, or even when those things weren't present, there was some kind of situation where everything revolved around one person and you felt invisible. And how is that playing out in your life today? How is that playing out in your relationship today, right? Are you then really happy to, or not necessarily happy to, but are you finding yourself really drawn to situations where you have to play out that dynamic again, where someone else is kind of the center of attention and you're having to be the rescuer, the caretaker, which in a very real life, everyday way looks like listening to people talk for hours, or being someone's therapist, always being the person that's giving advice to your friends and you're not supported when you're upset. those kind of things. You're always the one bending over backwards. Or if someone else has a boundary and says, no, I can't do that, does it trigger you and you kind of feel like, well, look at all the things I've done for you? That can be a sign that you grew up in one of these homes where it wasn't the healthiest. There's also something one of Wanda's children says. It's in I think it's the 90s episode or the early 2000s episode, where she's ill. It's after Halloween. She's kind of hungover from Halloween, but not in a hungover way. It's like because of everything that happens. And the kids, Billy and what's the other one called? Teddy? Billy and Teddy? Is that what they're called? No, Billy and something else. Anyway, they go with Agnes. They go next door. Shouldn't be going with Agnes, but anyway, they go next door with her, and one of the kids turns around and goes, but Mum, who's going to take care of you? And I heard that and I went, oh shit. Kids only say that when they're used to being in a caretaking role for the mother. That really shouldn't be a thing that enters a child's head. Again, I'm not saying anything bad about Wanda because I think she's great. I think a lot of this is very scripted to the character she created within the television show, but not actually her as a person within WandaVision, the series. I know that's a bit meta. The whole show is very meta. But really, a child shouldn't be thinking about taking care of his parent, especially when he or she is, under the age of 10. Like, they're nowhere near being even a teenager yet. And so when that is at play, that's just a sign that maybe you're having to take care of a parent. So again, just look at that and go, okay, did I go through something like that? And if I did, how's that playing out in my relationships today? It's just something to look at, right? Because the reason I'm talking about family homes all the time, especially if you're new to my work and don't really know my MO and the way that I work, whatever pattern we have going on today is a result of something that happened in the past. And so we're looking at the present, and in order to move you forward, we need to go back and find out the root cause of it so that we can move forward. It's kind of like when you're in the garden and you're trying to pull out a weed. You can't just like clip the top of it and hope for the best. You've got to pull it out by the root so it doesn't grow back. It's the same with our patterns. So anything that's going on today that feels a bit funky or just feels like shit, like you're over giving in a relationship, you can't seem to find people that want to stay, you're feeling resentful, you're feeling angry, you're feeling drained, you're fighting with a partner, or you're avoiding love altogether. All of these things started somewhere, because we're not born like that. We're not born with those kind of patterns. We're born with a very blank canvas. And also, if we were raised in a home that was really healthy, where everyone loved each other and communicated well and resolved conflict and arguments and everything was addressed and out in the open and everyone was regulating their emotions, you wouldn't suddenly go, you know what I'm going to do? Date people that treat me like shit. It wouldn't be a thing that came up because it wouldn't even be in your field of awareness. It's in your field of awareness because of what you experienced, right? So that's how I work, and it's how we move you forward. So that was point number 3, was on narcissism. So just look at that. Look at how that, with everything that I'm saying, I think 2 good questions to ask would be, 1, how is this familiar to me? / where did it come from? Who does this remind me of? And it might be like my mother, my father, my brother, my auntie. And the second question to ask would be, how is this impacting me today? And bonus question 3 would be, knowing that, now what action step am I going to take? I know I go through this very fast. I have a way, I think I'm probably ADHD, if we're being completely honest. But because I go through things very, very quickly, and obviously I have an accent, it might be worth slowing the speed down of the video, going back, watching things again, turning on subtitles, just to make sure you catch all of this, because I do work very quickly. The 4th point. Here's what I've got on my, these are my notes. I know, very professional. Oh, I shouldn't really be showing you my address. Oh, well, hopefully that just blurs out on through the dodgy Wi-Fi. Not really a lot I can do if it hasn't. The 4th point is, let me turn this over so I don't do that again, what a klutz. The 4th point is vision. The 4th point is vision. What are we saying about vision? I just want to make a note and a comment about how wonderful vision is as a person, as a partner, as a husband, as a father. Just great man. I know he's not a man technically. He's they call him a synthesoid. Is that the right word? You know, he's like basically a robot. But in terms of him as a being, as a personality, as a heart, as a soul, like, he's just wonderful. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that and to say that, because we're seeing a lot of dysfunction within this whole shebang, within this whole situation. And to see someone like him who's so good, so emotionally healthy, who's so steady and stable, and is such a secure base for her. He's so, what I mean by secure base is he's a constant for her. No wonder it was so traumatic to lose him. I mean, I would be devastated too. He's such a strong and constant, stable presence in her life. And he's wonderful. And seeing that is a wonderful thing to see, number one. But also the second thing is that by seeing that, we can start to understand why it was so devastating for her to not have built that home, to not have had the family and had the children. And no wonder she's creating this fantasy to escape, because it's so painful to have lost that. When we lose someone like that through the process of death and grief, or through the ending of a relationship, or a relationship that never really got off the ground, what we're doing is really complex, because we're actually grieving something that didn't happen. We're grieving the future memories. We're grieving the holidays and the birthdays and the home and the children and those milestones that we'll never experience with them. And psychologically, it's very, very complex. So it's really hard for us to process that. So no wonder Wanda wanted to escape. No wonder she wanted to. No wonder she wanted to create this fictional world to feel some relief from that pain. Yeah. So they're the 4 points. We talked about escaping into a fantasy world as a means to cope with difficult emotions. We talked about gaslighting and reality denial, like, oh, everything's fine, nothing to see here. Everything looks great on the outside, but things feel like shit on the inside. Did that happen in your family home? We talked about narcissism and what that looks like when a family revolves around one person, like planets orbit around the sun, and the impact that can have on us. It makes us feel like we're not important and that our role is to caretake for someone else. As a result of that, our needs are put on the back burner, and we don't even know how to say what we need. We don't even know what we need half the time. And the 4th point was vision. He is an example of a person that's emotionally healthy, very steady and stable, and someone who is a great partner to her. And really no wonder it was so challenging for her to have to say goodbye to him in such an upsetting way. I remember when I saw that in Endgame, I just bawled my eyes out. And truth be told, that's the only time I've seen Wanda and Vision in a film. And this series is the first time I've really seen them at depth. I hadn't really seen them that much in the MCU because of the films I watch, and they weren't in them. Typically, I've watched a lot of the Avengers stuff and a lot of the Thor films. I almost call them the Loki films. They are called the Thor films, but they might as well be called Loki, because that's what everyone's interested in. But yeah, there are a lot of the films that I've watched, and obviously a few of the others as well, Doctor Strange, etc. But I hadn't seen a lot of Wanda and Vision together before, and I just found them a really compelling couple. Their love is so real, and you see how Darcy reacts to them when she's watching them, and has a lot of empathy and compassion. I love Darcy as a character. I think she has a real, not just is she a great character with lots of like witty lines and she's fun, but she has this real depth of compassion and empathy, which I think is so beautiful to see and so pure. I think she's a really great, strong female character. And I love Jimmy Woo as well. It's props to Jimmy. I thought he was an excellent character, and he is, hopefully we'll see more of him in the MCU. I just really love what they did with him as well. Yeah. That's all. If you want more of this from me, then you can dig into the series on Relationship Expert Reacts. You can binge on all my videos here. I'm on various different places on the internet, including Twitter and Instagram. And you can find me on my website, which is CherylMuir.com, which also has the details of how to work with me if you need help in really addressing this, because it's good to know what's going on in your relationships and where it came from, but you will need some support in understanding how to actually feel your feelings and break free and create a reality where you have healthy relationships and you're not needing to escape into fictional worlds. And spoiler, the key, the way, the method is feeling our feelings. It's that simple and it's that challenging. So thank you so much for being here, and I will see you next time. Much love.